So, good evening, everyone. My name is Anurag, and I would like to welcome you all on this very insightful session on introduction to web technologies for beginners. And I hope that you all are doing well and safe at home. And before we start, I would quickly like to introduce Youthopedia. It's a direction-led platform for the students on their suitable career options. And with the prime focus on youth upliftment, our mission is to become a main source of guidance for the youth today as they face a number of career options, changing job situations, and along with it, a number of psychological issues that they experience on a everyday basis. And as we know that in these times of uncertainties, we believe that can be leveraged by gaining knowledge at home. So today we have with us Ashish Mittal as a moderator of the session. And Ashish is a chief mentor and founder of Turning Ideas. And he has been with the industry veteran with over 25 years of experience of working with corporates like IBM, Oracle, Microsoft, and Google. And over to you, Ashish.
Thanks, Anurag. Very warm welcome and good evening to everybody on the call today. Um, Thanks for joining in. And the objective of today's discussion, I think we've been thinking a lot about what is that we can do in these times of COVID. And we kind of realize it's very important for building skills. And typically, when we start building skills, it's very important or a little difficult to figure out what is my first steps. So, just to set the context of the discussion today, this is in partnership with Wisdom Club. Wisdom is one of the leading inspiration club or a co-working space based out of Greater Kailash. If Ambika joins in, she will talk more about it. But uh, I'm sorry about it. But broadly, this is a go-to place for university students, startup professionals, founders, mentors to actually go and intermingle in terms of giving technology know-how and other supports which typically the any startup founder needs. The objective of today's discussion has been, I've seen working with a lot of professionals, a lot of students. If they want to learn a technology, they really don't know what are my first few steps. So we thought that we will do a series of events which will introduce you to the web technologies. To if you want to pursue a career in technology space, how are you going to take the first few steps? And I think Ashish will talk more about it. So my background, as Anurag mentioned, has been spending over 25 years, more than 2 decades, working with technology professionals, large corporates like IBM, Oracle, Microsoft, Google, and for last 10 years we've been running Turning Ideas Ventures, which actually helps student entrepreneurs, people who want to pursue career in technology space or startup space. We help them a guide and mentor in building a career. Today I have Ashish Agarwal. Ashish is one of the finest technology professionals I have worked with, a very deep technology person, having worked in multiple technologies and seen technologies evolve over a period of time. So basically, Ashish is going to take you through in terms of right from the fundamentals of web technologies, and I think we are doing this because we are, this session is called for beginners. So I am assuming that a lot of you are kind of new to web technology. You kind of hear that Angular JS, Python, HTTP, SOAP, web services. What does it really means? How do you take your first steps? So that's clearly the objective of session today. I would really try to make this as a workshop and not a one-way monologue, which typically it's not a teacher session, which typically you would get in a university. So feel free to keep on pinging in your questions in the chat. I'll be moderating it and I'll take that as and when we get filler time between Ashish. But I would strongly encourage use this next 2 hours to learn, and basically you should be able to head start your development career or technology career post the session. Just a piece of advice, you have to attend the full session to get a certificate. This is a certification training. This certificate is something which you can show back to when you go out for placements or go for campus interviews or go for any other interviews for employment. So this will become really handy. Please do stay till the end and ping your email IDs before the close of the session for us to actually send you the certificates after the session is done. So Ashish, over to you. Maybe you might want to introduce yourself, and then we won't jump directly into the session.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Ashish. So, like Ashish, first of all, welcome everyone. Ashish mentioned, we will be going through this session, which will introduce you to the very basics of the web technology. It will help you to get started with how the web functions, how to get started with the coding for the web. So, just a bit about me. So I've been in this field for doing web development for more than 10 years now. Currently, I'm running a technology lab where we do a lot of web and mobile development. I'm heading it as its technology director. So I've been specializing with a lot of web and cloud technology for the past 10 years. And I've been a part of a few startups where we've built a technology stack for the web right from the ground up, helped them launch the product onto a global scale. Yeah, that's pretty much about me. I'll be guiding you through different aspects of web, like how to get started with web, what are some of the basic terminologies that you will hear around the web, what are the different kind of web applications or what kind of different kind of web codes that we'll be writing. So just to give you an overview of what this session will cover, we'll talk about some of the concepts of web, how the web works, and how do we go about web development. We'll help you understand what are the various technologies, what are the various softwares that are, or the tools that are used for web development. We'll have a very quick technical discussion later, and you will be also able to grasp the knowledge of, if you are participating in a technical discussion, just a bit of jargon that you get to understand, at least the basics. And then if you have any questions, we'll take them through.
I think good to go.
Sure. Okay, so first we'll start with how the web applications actually work, how we started with the web and how they evolved into the applications as they are today. So in the very beginning of the, I won't say in the very beginning, but quite a few years back, this is how the web pages used to look. They didn't have much interactability. They were more or less static pages that could provide you a link to other websites or web pages. So this is again, this is something around 8 to 10 years back. This is what the pages used to look like. That's when the start of the web actually happened. Then we moved on to something more interactive websites. So for example, how the Facebook works. So it will allow you to interact with the web page, allow you to enter the data, submit that data, and based on that data, you get to see other parts of the website or the web pages.
Guys, if you have any questions on any one of these, I think these are really fundamental because the way the web has evolved and the corresponding technologies have evolved is very, very important for you to understand how the web technologies work today. From static to dynamic or interactive and interactive to applications is that journey. So you guys need to be really clear. So feel free to ask questions on the chat window if you really want to get, or you can probably unmute yourself and ask questions too.
So yeah, how the interactive websites used to work through when you used to fill up a form. They used to, when you used to press a button, it used to send the data to the server, and then the server responded with a new set of web pages. Now, in today's modern era, we have something we call the reactive web, where you are able to interact with the website more freely. You'll have different options. You'll see different kind of interactions, very seamless interactions, where even when you're, say, typing something, submitting a form, it won't need to actually reload the whole page. It will do the data processing in the backend while you're still able to function with the website. Another important feature these days is the responsiveness. So what do we actually mean by responsiveness is the adaptability of the web page on different form factors or the screen sizes. As every one of you would know, that every single website these days works perfectly fine on the laptop, works perfectly fine on the mobile screen, works perfectly fine on the tablets. So that aspect of the web page is actually termed as responsiveness. So any questions that you guys have so far, or really this is how the web has evolved? If there are no questions, I'll move ahead to the next part where we start getting into the web applications and how they work.
So I think one thing I want to bring and highlight, I think you talked about the responsive and reactive. So you will hear these two terms very, very often as we design and implement applications. Um, One being what is reactive web. Reactive web is, as Ashish mentioned, you really don't need to reload. It is formed multiple components within the web page or the web application, and each web app component can actually refresh themselves. And responsive means that the web or the application should be able to work on various form factor, be it a tablet, mobile phone, or a laptop. So I see two hands coming up. Uh, so can you? I'll just unmute those people. So yeah. So Paricha, can you raise your question, please? And Mohammed also. Can you please share a question? Paricha and Mohammed, I think you raised hands too. Do you have a question?
I think they have mistakenly raised hands.
Okay, no worries. All right. Go ahead, Ashish.
Sure. So we'll hear a lot about the term called web applications. So the web applications are actually the websites or including the other platforms. So it is what you see in the browser plus what is happening at the servers, which are able to serve you or provide you with that data onto your system or the device. So web application can broadly be categorized into two kinds of applications. One is something which is presentation oriented, which is actually you see on your browser or in forms of your mobile apps, the data that you see. The other type of web applications are service oriented, which majorly deal with the data or the data processing aspects and do not actually show a lot of do not actually give the users a web page in the browser. These are the two kind of web applications. They can again further be segregated into two aspects based on what the platform those web applications are running on. So broadly, we'll also hear something like this is a client-side application or a server-side application. So client-side applications are the sites that actually work in your browser, is what you actually see as a web page, whereas server side is again the data part of the things where at the back end where we generate the data, process the data, and then forward it to the client side application to present it in a meaningful manner. So if we have to map it out, it will be like presentation oriented applications are more something that execute on the client side or the user side, whereas the service-oriented applications run on the server side or in the back end of things.
Ashish, there's one request around making this little kind of multilingual. So,
Okay.
how many? I'm not sure how many people would want this to be both English and Hindi, but we are open. So, हम हिंदी में भी बोलते रहेंगे, बताते रहेंगे और इंग्लिश में भी बताते रहेंगे. So, you might want to use both languages. आशीष, हिंदी में भी आप थोड़ा समझाते रहिए कि क्योंकि ऑडियंस आई थिंक इंक्लूड्स बोथ.
ठीक है. So basically दोबारा से वेब एप्लीकेशंस के बारे में एक बार बताने के लिए, तो वेब एप्लीकेशंस दो टाइप की होती हैं मेजरली. एक होती है जिसको हम बोलते हैं प्रेजेंटेशन ओरिएंटेड, और या फिर जो हमें एक्चुअली दिखेगा यूजर को उनके स्क्रीन पे. एंड दूसरी टाइप होती है सर्विस ओरिएंटेड, जो जनरली डेटा को प्रोसेस करने के लिए, डेटा को मैनिपुलेट करने के लिए यूज होती है. तो इनके भी हम अगर हम जनरली आप सुनेंगे कि दो तरीके की एप्लीकेशंस लोग के बारे में लोग बात करते हैं कि एक क्लाइंट साइड एप्लीकेशन है या फिर फ्रंट एंड है, या दूसरी तरह की एप्लीकेशन होती है जो सर्वर साइड है या फिर लोग बोलते हैं बैक एंड है. तो प्रेजेंटेशन ओरिएंटेड या फिर प्रेजेंटेशन ओरिएंटेड वेब एप्लीकेशन क्लाइंट साइड या फिर यूजर के डिवाइस पे चलती हैं, जबकि सर्विस ओरिएंटेड या फिर सर्वर साइड एप्लीकेशंस जो है वो सर्वर पे चलते हैं और वो क्लाइंट साइड एप्लीकेशंस को डेटा फीड करते हैं. तो वो डेटा भेजते हैं जिससे क्लाइंट साइड एप्लीकेशंस जो है उसको मीनिंगफुल मैनर में प्रेजेंट कर सके. So any questions here, guys?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. So I see two raised hands actually.
Yeah, so I don't know whether it's okay. Let me try Rahil. Yeah, so Rahil, can you please ask your question? Rahil? Rahil, can you please ask your question? We can't hear. I think what I suggest, guys, if you can, instead of raising hands, if you can put your question on chat box and I'll ask on your behalf. Ashish, go ahead, please.
Sure. So अभी हमने देखा कि we saw right now कि how the applications actually, what they are the types of application. Now we try to understand how this application or how the whole flow of the data or our request actually work. हमें कैसे हम web applications को एक user access करता है और कैसे servers को process करके कितने layers से गुजर के फिर हमें वो actually उसका data दिखता है. So whenever we start or access the web application, जब भी हम इसे start करते हैं, सबसे पहले हम एक URL को अपने browser में डालते हैं. ये दोनों चीजों के लिए होता है, चाहे वो सर्विस ओरिएंटेड एप्लीकेशन हो चाहे वो प्रेजेंटेशन ओरिएंटेड एप्लीकेशन हो. हर एक वेब एप्लीकेशन को एक्सेस करने के लिए एक या तो एक यूआरएल जरूरी होता है. वो यूआरएल दो फॉर्म में हो सकता है, या तो एक आईपी एड्रेस के फॉर्म में या फिर एक डोमेन नेम के फॉर्म में. डोमेन नेम वापस से एक आईपी एड्रेस पे ऑटोमेटिकली रिजॉल्व करता है. एंड ये जो आईपी एड्रेस होता है ये सर्वर का एक्चुअल एड्रेस होता है जहाँ पे ये प्रोसेसिंग हो सकती है. So whenever a request is initiated, so basically whenever we initiate a request, it is sent to a server or the controller. But that request is sent in the form of a URL. So whenever you want to access a web application, you have to enter a URL, whether it is a service-oriented application or a presentation-oriented application. And that URL will be in the form of either an IP address or a domain name like google.com or facebook.com and some part ahead of it. But essentially, these domain names will also resolve to an IP address. Now, the IP address actually depicts the address where this request will go. So it's just like any other message. Like if someone has to send you a mail, they will send it to your home address with a complete definition. Like this is the house number, this is the street, and this is the city. Similarly, IP address denotes that format in the world of web. Where is this server located? How can it be accessed? Okay, so ये जो yellow box है, this more or less represents our server, this yellow box. So how it is ideally handled in most of the applications is a request will come to a controller. Now, controller is controller is a layer that actually accepts and decides what does it want to do with that request, what business logic should be applied to it, and how the data should be accessed for it. So basically controller क्या करता है, वो डिसाइड करेगा कि जो रिक्वेस्ट आई है उसके कॉरेस्पॉन्डिंग हमें क्या उस पर लॉजिक लगाना है, उसको कैसे रिक्वेस्ट को प्रोसेस करना है, उसके लिए क्या क्या हमें डेटा एक्सेस करना है, ये सारा डिसीजन कंट्रोलर लेता है और उसके हिसाब से क्या हमें रिस्पॉन्स वापस भेजना है. So from the controller, the request moves on to the business logic, where we actually write the code for processing the data. So here we define how the data is processed. For example, in our database, the data is stored in the form of a table. Like mine, there'll be a table with the collection of names, and the name would be say Ashish, name would be say Rohit or any other. But depending on the request, the business logic will tell, okay, I want to see the records for Ashish. So this part of the decision, like which data is to be accessed and how it is to be processed, is taken care by the business logic layer. Business logic layer, it will internally make a data access to the data source. So data access is actually a layer which provides certain interfaces, which provides a method for the business layer to access the data onto the hard drive of the server. To put it in a very simple terms, तो डेटा एक्सेस वो फंक्शनैलिटी प्रोवाइड कर रहा है कि बिजनेस लेयर जो है अपना जो उसको डेटा चाहिए वो एक्सेस कर पाए और उसको अपने हिसाब से प्रोसेस कर पाए. From there, the business layer, excuse me. From there, the business layer will actually process the data. एक बार data access उसको मिल जाता है business layer को, then it processes the data and sends it back to the controller to forward it to the presentation layer. जो presentation layer होगी, that will format that data into a meaningful user interactive data, जो कि हमारा web page के form में आता है. It will make the whole web page in HTML and CSS and JavaScript and send it back to the browser, to the user basically. So this is then ideally what a cycle will look like for any of the web requests. So the inflow of the data and the corresponding output of what the browsers will actually get back in a request. This is how the logic will flow, that it goes to the controller, then processes the data through business layer and comes back to the controller through the presentation layer. So any questions here? Okay, so then we move on to the next part of our application, which is the web services. So what are the different kind of web services and how do they actually work? So web services, like I explained earlier, would be these are the part of the web that actually process and send back the data to our reactive sites. So these days we have, like I explained earlier in the web, that they are so reactive that you can click on a web page, it will process in the backend and get the data. But to process the data in the backend and get the new data, it again needs to have a mechanism to talk to the server. The web services enable that mechanism for our client-side application to talk to the web server or the server-side applications in a non-interruptive manner. As in the user's functionality doesn't get interrupted, but it can ask for the data in the backend. So there are two kinds of web services that are popularly used these days. One is a RESTful web service, or we call it as REST APIs. And the second one is the SOAP services. And how these applications are architected are called a service-oriented architecture. So we'll come to the architecture definition later, how the architecture actually works, how the applications are architected. But these are the two popular web services, and this is we see in action.
This is one important point, guys. Considering there are most of the backend. So there are two types of developer jobs which you will find. One is what we call as front end developer, and Ashish will talk about the technologies in that space. And the other is the back end developer. And when you talk about back end developer, you will hear a lot of people talking about, can you build a REST API? Can you do SOAP APIs? Do you understand web services? So this is very important for you to understand what are the kinds of services.
Okay. Okay. So we'll just dig in a bit more into what the web services are like. So one of the important kind, so most popular kind of web services is the REST compliant web services. So web services or the REST APIs, they they interact in a form very similar to what the HTML works, and these are the services that which work in a stateless manner. That means that they do not have the knowledge of the previous request that was made to the server, and they are meant to execute independently. They are not dependent on the previous state, or they are not manipulating the future state. And they ideally are exchanged in two formats. One is an XML format, with which so XML is the same format in which we write our HTML code. And the other format is the JSON format, which is part of the JavaScript language, where we define how the data can be written in an understandable manner that it can be understood by a JavaScript code. The second broad category of web services is arbitrary or the other web services. Now this contains our SOAP web services, our RPC or remote procedure calls. Now how these work is these allow you to perform arbitrary operations or the functions that are stateful or that are stored with the web server itself. So in case of a REST web service, you'll have a very simple methodology where you get a URL similar to your web page. You make a request to that URL and you get the data back. In the other kind of web services, it'll be more of a more like a programming approach, where you have to write a code to make call to a specific function that the web service will be exposing. So for example, if I had to fetch a list of users on the Facebook, just an example, I would simply get an URL where I would say let's say api.facebook.com/users, and that will give me that will return me a list of the users, and I can do this in my web browser. Whereas arbitrary web services will be something that I'll have to write the code and access the web service, open in connection to the web service, and then I'll have to call a function in form of a code that I'll have to write, say, web service dot list all the users, and then I have to wait for that function to execute to see the data. Now, arbitrary web services ideally cannot be executed in the web browser itself without using any third-party plugins. But most of the REST services can again be accessed through the browser itself. So each web page we see is actually a REST request, is a REST web service request in a presentational form rather than a service-oriented form. So just a bit more about REST. We are focusing a lot on this because this is one of the this is the most popular type of web services that you will come across. Anyone you ask for will always ask you to build RESTful APIs for the backend, and your front end or the client side application should be able to consume those REST APIs. So REST stands for Representational State Transfer. So again, this is a state transfer or the representational state transfer. It means that the state from the browser is going to the server, but your in the form of data that we send, but previous uh, states are not cared about by the REST concept. So it follows the client server architecture where browser acts as a client and the backend server will serve all the requests that appear for the REST. It is stateless in manner. It is stateless in manner, which essentially means that it does not have any knowledge of what did the user access previously, what did the user might access next. It just gives the current state of the user to the web server. So ideally, on all the REST services, we also make the data cached, or so caching is a mechanism so that we don't have to query or load our data again and again from the database. So it's very easy with the RESTful services to implement a caching layer. So you send a request to the web. If the data hasn't changed in the database, it gets served from the cache in a very fast manner. And all the REST interfaces have a very uniform methodology or uniform way to access REST APIs, which is in the form of a URL and a verb that is associated with a REST request. So, and these services or the applications that actually utilize REST or that actually can work with this are called RESTful services or the RESTful applications. So whenever you hear the term that this is a RESTful server-side application, it means that the application is actually exposing some REST API or it is a REST service. When you hear the term that this is a RESTful client-side application or the RESTful presentational application or the mobile app, for example. Hello.
Go ahead, guys. I think there was some disturbance.
Yeah. So yeah, if you hear that this is a RESTful client-side application or the RESTful mobile application, it means that it is something, it is an application that is consuming the REST API or that talks to the REST API or a RESTful service.
I'm seeing a lot of some background noise. Who is that?
Let me just check it once.
Yeah.
Thanks,
So,
Anurag.
yeah. So moving on to the RESTful web services, how they look like and how they work. So each REST request will have two parts to it. One will be a verb. So verb will define us what kind of operation we want to do. So the verbs are get, post, put, and delete. And the other part of a RESTful web service would be the URL from which it can be accessed. So for example, if I say get /product/12, so ideally in a generic manner, which is taken as a standard across the web community. So this would represent a request that you are trying to retrieve a product with the ID 12. Get request tells us that we are trying to retrieve something. Product or the path, initial path tells us what that entity might be, entity or what item we are trying to retrieve. And 12 or the part which ends the part at the latter part of the entity will tell us the ID or the identifier, like how this entity can be identified uniquely. So with the GET request, we retrieve the data for the entity number 12 or the record in our database that might have the ID or the identifier as 12. I see 3 hands being raised.
For all those who are raising their hands, can you please put in your questions on the chat window? I'm tracking that because it's a little difficult to get you on mute. And please put your questions on the chat window and we will take that. Thank you. I think this is the most important part for the backend developers, people who want to pursue career in the backend development. These are really fundamentals of get, post, put, and delete. If you get this right, I think you'll be able to create so simple web services with simple data push and fill.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So, yeah. So GET is something that we use to retrieve the data, while POST is something we use to create the data. So again, the verb changes here. Like verb defines what we are trying to do, the operation part. Again, we make a request to say post / product /4 part might not be there or might be there. It's something that is optional. And then you send some data along with it. Say, for example, when I'm creating a product, I might want to insert some name, quantity, and a price with it. So with the post request, I'll be sending that data as a body of my request. So that I'll explain later, like how the whole body part of the request works. So we send the data with our RESTful API. The server processes it and it will create a record with it with the ID S4 or the identifier S4 into its records. Now the verb put is actually used to update the data at a specific endpoint or the specific URL with the specific ID. And delete is utilized to delete the record. So what the request put /product/3 will do, it will update the product with the ID 3 with the whatever data we send over here. Of course, the backend might have some validations or it might reject or accept certain data, but essentially what it would represent to anyone, you would say that make a put request to this specific URL. It will it will give them a sense that you are asking them to update an entity on the backend. Moving on to the delete part. So similar to how the GET request used to work, delete doesn't really have a body. The delete request is only to inform the backend or the server side that this specific entity is to be deleted from the records. So guys, you'll essentially note, so whenever you start with the backend or the RESTful development, these 4 are the most important verbs that you will be using. And these will form the basis for the REST application. So we have these, so essentially a question might arise that why do we have these verbs? So these verbs are more or less to give the sense as to what the operation is about. We could have used the GET request to create a product as well, but in the form of generalization, we will lose the meaning. It will get more and more difficult to identify what is the purpose of that particular service. We could use the post request to update the data as well, But then again, it won't take, when you see the definition of the REST service, or when you tell someone that this is my REST API, they will not easily be able to identify what the purpose of that API is. So these verbs help us quickly identify what the purpose that API is serving.
I hope this is very clear. The 4 types of the web service requests.
I think.
Yeah, Ashish, we can move forward, I think.
Yeah. So just a bit of an overview on the SOAP services as well. SOAP is the another popular service that we use. It's not used a lot these days, but this is one of the services that service protocol, I'll say, that was used quite a bit before we moved on to the REST services. So SOAP, or the Simple Object Access Protocol, is used for exchanging information in the form of XML data. So it again has a URL where the whole SOAP service will be running, and it relies essentially on the XML that will tell you what all are the operations that you can perform using the SOAP API, or what all data can you exchange with the help of the SOAP API. So how a SOAP service will work is, when you make a request to the SOAP API, it will send back a list of the operations that you can perform, and choosing from one of those operations along with the specific format of the data it requires, you'll have to make that function call or the SOAP request to the server, and it will process your data accordingly.
So between SOAP and REST, which is more prevalent nowadays, Ashish, you might want to share. And when do, from the architecture decision standpoint, when do you actually choose to do a backend with REST API versus SOAP? And when is SOAP good? Would you want to answer that now or maybe later?
No, sure. I'll just take that now only. It'll be good. So essentially, when you're deciding like what kind of service to use, it'll depend on what purpose that service or the API is serving. So if it is in communication between two servers or two machines or devices in which the user doesn't really come into picture directly, then you might want to use SOAP protocol. And RESTful APIs are used when the user or the browser applications might actually need to access the data directly. So SOAP essentially cannot work from a browser to the server side. SOAP will work from a server to a server side. It can be consumed and exposed by server side applications only. So nowadays, even for these server side to server side communication, we most commonly use the RESTful API. Because RESTful APIs nowadays with the JSON or the JavaScript format allow us to exchange data in a recursive and an open manner. With the SOAP, one of the problem that comes up is that you have to rely on a very specific XML structure. You have to define in what format the data can be exchanged. With more and more web development getting distributed these days, it's very important to keep that flexibility in mind, that the data that you are exchanging right now, it might change a couple of months later. The format for that might also change. To allow for that functionality and to manage it very easily, we use the REST APIs. And if you will see these days, at least roughly 95% of all the public APIs rely on the REST protocol or the REST framework.
So basically, for people who are trying to pursue a career in the backend development space, should actually master the REST versus SOAP. Am I right?
Yeah, they should focus more on the REST APIs.
Okay, let's go move forward, please.
Right. So another concept that we'll see, or which will be very important, will be the URL rewriting part. So what does URL rewriting means? Excuse me. So URL rewriting actually represents the part where what you see as the URL in the browser might actually represent a different path onto the server. This is important because we want to show, or we want the user to remember the URL easily. Like we want them to be able to make sense of the URL. And this gets important from the search engine's perspective as well, because if the URL is something that makes sense, that is human readable, then it is indexed better. It is basically, it is something that people are more likely to click on or access. So for example, let's say if I wanted to access a product that had a name, say Mini Flow Cutter Brown. So to access this product, I might make a request, or what the URL might look like in my browser would be something like this: /product /Mini Flow Cutter Brown / an ID of it. But my web server will actually be transforming that URL into something that might have not made sense for the user. So depending on the different architectures or frameworks that we might be using, it might be transformed into something like this given example. So it will tell them, it will need to tell the program that is running on the backend or the server side what action to take, what is the ID of the product, but it might not have any relevance to this part where we set Mini Flow Cutter Brown. So the purpose that URL rewriting is serving is essentially to make sure that the addresses or the web URLs are more meaningful to the end users. So this is very relevant in terms, say for example, if you were to make a courier, or if you were to make a post or send a message to someone, so it would be a lot easier for you to remember if you knew their house number, if you knew the city, and if you knew the state and country. You could easily write it down and you would remember it very simply. Whereas if someone gave you an address, say PO box number, let's say a 10-digit number, and then some other numbers following that, it would essentially not make sense to you, and it won't be easy for you to remember. But internally, when how the address even works is like it is mapped to different zones or locations. From there, it will be mapped to a specific house. So that internal functioning is handled by the concept of the URL rewriting. So this is what the flow would look like for the URL rewriting. So a user will access a URL which is meaningful to them. The web server will actually transform that URL into something that is meaningful to the application server or the internal application. And the internal application will then process the data accordingly. Say it wanted to see for the product ID 11577676. So to search for that product ID, process the data, generate the HTML for it, and send back to the user, and they still see the same URL that they had requested. So essentially for the web server, it got the data into the format that it needed, whereas the user sees the format that makes sense to them. Okay, so these were some of the concepts that were important to get started with the web applications or developing the web applications. Just to do a bit of a recap. So you need to be aware of what kind of application you're building, whether it's just a server-side application or just a client-side application. You need to be, if it's a server-side application, then you need to be aware of what kind of service you're building. it's a RESTful service or a SOAP service. In most of the cases, it will be a RESTful service. And then you need to understand how how the whole URL part for the REST service will work, and how it might be mapped into or transformed into a different format internally without user getting to know about it. So in the next part, we'll try to understand what are the different languages that are used for both type of applications, and then we'll come across some of the libraries, and then we'll see an example of how to write a web application. So for the very basic, any browser understands only three languages. That's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. A browser can never understand any other language, or all the browsers, or most of the browsers are not designed to understand any other language. The other parts that we see, say for example, if someone tells you that they're writing a website in PHP, so that PHP will be something that is running on the server side, but to the browser, it will only be sending the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So just a bit more about what HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are, or what purpose do they serve to the browser. So HTML full form is the hypertext markup language. So this defines the structure or tells our browser that this is the information it needs to present, and it needs to present it in this specific structure. Like it might contain the headings, it might contain the paragraphs, it might contain the images, and it defines a specific set to tell the browser that this is an image, this is a heading, this is a paragraph, this is a list, and so on. CSS or cascaded style sheets are the styling layer which tells the browser how to present those elements and how to format them. So here is where we tell the browser that, okay, show the heading in 24 pixels and show the heading as blue. Excuse me. The CSS will represent the styling part of our application. Then another part that comes is the JavaScript part. So JavaScript is again a part of the code that can be executed on the browser. So this is what makes the browsers reactive. So when I click on a button, I can control what that click does with the help of the JavaScript. So I can tell that button click to maybe change the font or maybe change the text on the web page itself, then and there instantly, or make a request to one of the REST services or the REST APIs and update the current web page with that data. So the whole interactivity part is actually handled by JavaScript. So these are three main technologies or the three main basic languages that you'll ever serve the browser-side application in. Different frameworks will only compile your code into these three languages. On the backend side, we have a lot of languages. Some of the very popular ones being JavaScript, Python, Ruby, and PHP. Now, if you notice, the JavaScript is something that we can run on the browser side as well, and with the help of Node.js and some of the other runtime environments, we can execute JavaScript on our servers as well. So since it is one of the languages that can be handled at the front end as well as the back end, it is one of the most popular languages in the world right now. The second more important, the another important more popular language is Python. So I'm very sure that anyone who has the interest in the web technologies, they would have very much heard about Python. Python is something that executes only on the server side. The browser doesn't understand how Python works. Python in itself is very powerful as it has a lot of tools that help us manipulate data in different ways. Similar to Python, there is Ruby, there is PHP. PHP is another very popular language, which is relatively simple to understand, learn, and write. We have Ruby, we have Java, we have Golang, and there are a lot of other languages that execute on the backend side. But mostly, if you talk about web development, so these four are the languages that are heavily popular across the world. So now we'll move on to the libraries that are based on these languages or the other languages that are commonly used. So onto the front-end side, we have a lot of libraries. So for a long period of time, when the reactiveness or the web applications were getting modernized, where they could utilize JavaScript in a very good scale, a lot of it was contributed by jQuery. So JavaScript in its native form was a bit difficult to write. It had a lengthy process to write. jQuery made it very simple using its approach. It made it very simple for us to write and manipulate the web page and apply different styles to it. So, a lot of these modern websites or the web applications that you'll see, they use these modern frameworks called Vue.js, React, Angular. So these are the three again most popular frameworks that you'll hear about. That if you want to make a if you want to make a web application, maybe people will ask you to make it in React, or maybe they'll ask you to make in Angular or maybe Vue.js. So Angular, Vue, and React, these are some of the JavaScript frameworks or the front-end frameworks that help us write the reactive applications. We have some libraries called.
Ashish, you might want to talk about in terms of why frameworks, how frameworks actually help in accelerating,
Sure.
why it's important to learn versus doing coding on JS.
Sure. So basically, why we are using these libraries or frameworks is essentially if I have to write a JavaScript code, I might have to write 100 lines of code just to make say an element from change from showing the user profile to allowing the user to change their password. But using these frameworks, they already have these tools and they already have these uh, sort of parts written into them, which help us do those things with 2 or 3 lines of code. So these libraries or tools essentially have the functionality already written into them that you'll be using a lot more often. So if I was to write an application ground up, it might take me 10 hours of work. But using these frameworks, I could reduce it to say 2 hours of work or 3 hours of work. That is one of the most common reason that people stick with one of these technologies. So similar to how these JavaScript frameworks work. So a lot of emphasis these days is on the design aspect of the web page or the application. The application needs to work well. That is taken care by our JavaScript part. But the application at the same time needs to look and feel well. That part is taken care by our CSS or the style sheets. So to support these, to allow us to rapidly write those style sheets, there are some libraries and concepts. So one of the most popular frameworks for CSS is Bootstrap. It already has certain elements built in, which you can use. Say, for example, if you want to make a button, you might have to make a button that actually looks like what Bootstrap is looking like right now on your screen. You might have to write the CSS code that might be 10 lines long. But Bootstrap will enable you to write the same code without using any further customization from your end. And you can add some attributes to your markup, just a few more classes to your HTML element. And this button is already there on your screen. Similarly, so these are some of the libraries. Now, when we talk about the libraries, they allow us to manipulate the languages in a simpler manner, but then we have some frameworks. So for example, Next.js and Gatsby are some of the frameworks that allow us to build applications that have a lot more functionality inbuilt into them. So we'll see those some of those functionalities when we start writing our code. So these frameworks allow us basically to not have to write those similar part that we'll usually be writing, say routing or understanding the URLs or rewriting the URLs. So those parts are automatically taken care of by these frameworks. So moving on to the backend side. So some of the very popular frameworks are
Just
Node.
one question, Ashish. How
Yeah.
does someone decide, considering there are more lot of front-end frameworks and back-end server-side frameworks or libraries are available? How should someone decide which framework to pick and start building the skills on? Which were the popular ones, and is there a way to decide that should I go with Angular or should I go with React? And on the front-end side, and similarly on the back-end side too.
Okay. So yeah. So like Ashish, I think it was a very useful question. To decide which framework to actually choose and use, you need to understand two parts. One, how complex is your application going to be? And second, how much support for that kind of application you have in that framework. So each framework has its own community, or there are people who are writing code continuously on those frameworks and they are sharing it with others, which is the open source part of our development environment. A lot of people share the code publicly to help others use that same code. So in terms of popularity, React has a really, really good ecosystem. It has a lot of libraries that are you can use. Say, for example, you want to make an animation on React, there's a library for it. You can use it. Write 2 lines of code and your animation would be ready.
Is there
So,
is there a corresponding mapping saying that when should you use jQuery versus React versus Vue versus Angular, which people can refer back at a later point? Or maybe you might want to tell which are the top most popular frameworks which the people here on the call should actually develop skills on, considering from the demand standpoint.
okay. So basically, from the demand standpoint, if you say the most popular framework these days is React, most of your applications, including Facebook, Netflix, Uber, Airbnb, any major application that you use today that you talk about would be written on React. Angular is used in a lot of enterprise environment where people are using a bit traditional methodology of developing the application and a very strict methodology to develop those applications. And jQuery was something that used to be used until a few years back, until React did not come into popularity. jQuery was the go-to library for any application to write their front-end JavaScript. So if you have to ask me like what you should build your skill on to start with, I'll suggest starting with React. It has a huge demand in the market. It enables you to write the application for the browsers as well as for mobile, which we'll come to later at some later point. And if you ask anyone, they'll prefer their application to be written in React. A very common reason for that is the huge support for React in the community. There are a lot of libraries, there are a lot of tools that you can readily use for your application.
Thanks, Ashish.
Okay, so moving on to the backend side of the framework, one of the most popular frameworks or the runtime environments that we have these days is Node.js. Node.js again is something that enables you to run the JavaScript onto the backend side of the code. Later on, we'll see an application that's running on the Node.js environment and working on the backend side. Another popular framework is Laravel. Laravel is for people who like to write code in PHP or who know PHP very well. Then we have some popular frameworks for Python, Django and Flask. One of the very popular frameworks that essentially led to the rise of all the other frameworks that you know of today is Rails, Ruby on Rails, as it is popularly known. And one of the other popular frameworks for Java, or the Java is again one of the very popular languages, but it's a bit of a lengthier process to write it. Hence, people prefer writing more of the code in JavaScript in terms of Node.js or Laravel or Django. These are some of the frameworks. Even on the backend side, if we see, you'll see the frameworks being used two terminologies for the frameworks on the backend side. One are called Sinatra-like frameworks, or the frameworks that are minimalistic in nature. They only serve you with a very basic purpose of being able to allow your application to send and receive data. And the other frameworks are called Rails-like framework, which is this Ruby on Rails-like framework. And these enable you to manipulate your data, process your data, let's say even send emails or store images and all those kind of functionalities. They are more or less frameworks that are fully capable of handling the data. So again, by the popularity and the choice that you might have to make, the first thing that you might have to decide on the backend is which language do you prefer to work with. And depending on that, you might be able to choose one of these frameworks. So since today, if you see the front end or the presentational aspects of the applications are very, very important. People have to learn JavaScript if they want to understand the front end development. And the same can be utilized on the backend as well with the help of Node.js. And that's what people prefer these days, that they write a lot of their code in Node.js. And since they are capable of writing JavaScript, they'll also be able to understand a lot of the code from the front end, which essentially helps to close a lot of gap which these two different categories or the type of developers might have. A backend developer would be able to understand what the front-end developer has to actually do to process their code. And same goes to the front-end developer. They might be able to understand what the backend developer might have written to help them run their code on the front end.
So which make, I think, a very important conclusion, saying that I think even if the people on the call start learning JavaScript, I think that would be a good starting point to understand frameworks both on the front end and back end side.
Right. So I think JavaScript is very, very important to know, because you have to understand how the front end works. And for the backend also, if you have a good understanding of JavaScript, you'll be able to build your applications with a lot of open source tools and libraries that you can get access to. So JavaScript would be my suggestion, or the go-to tool to use for any of the versions for backend or for the frontend.
So there's one question about between VB scripting and JavaScript, which Dr. Parminder is asking, which one is a better option?
Actually, both of them serve a different purpose. So JavaScript essentially is a scripting language used majorly for browsers and the server-side codes. VB script, or the Visual Basic Script, is essentially used for the desktop versions of the application, or it would be used in the legacy applications which run on the Internet Explorer. So JavaScript would any day be a preferable version for the language for the two reasons. One, it has a very wide support. Secondly, it can serve the purpose for you to build an application that can run on web browser, that can run on your desktop, or that can run on your mobile. So if someone has to start with, I would any day recommend starting with JavaScript, so that if they want to work on any aspect of the front end, they get an easy access for it. Similarly, if they want to try something out on the back end, it works with back end. So, Dr. Parminder, I would say that security issues come with VB script and JavaScript both. security issues are more to do with how you write the code than the languages or the frameworks themselves. So it's security concerns, let's say the leaking of data or the exposing data to the other resources is something that the developer needs to take care of more. Okay. So, guys, any questions so far here?
I think we're good, Ashish. In interest of time, we should probably move on to the showing the magic by actually coding and helping people pick up that.
Okay, so let's start with trying to write our first web application. So we'll write an application that works on the front end, works on the back end and serves us the code that will run on the front end.
And I kind of encourage everybody on the call to basically make a note and definitely try this after the session to write their first set of code. And Ashish will guide you in terms of what application platform to use. It's a cloud-based IDE environment, so it's fairly easy. And a few lines of code will give you comfort and confidence that you can build easily apps. Over to you,
Okay,
Ashish.
thank you, Ashish. So to start with, so I'm using this platform called repl.it. So repl.it basically gives you an ability to run your server side or the browser side code and write that code in the browser itself. It's a cloud-based IDE and service. So for this demonstration purpose, I'm using that. And this is something that you can use to write the code in any of the languages. They have support for different languages. Just to start with or try out your skills, I would recommend going onto this platform and writing your code and trying out some snippets. To start with this code, so we are basically writing in web server in Node.js that will allow us to serve a static file, and that will also allow us to render some dynamic data or that data that will depend on our on the request the user is making. So that data will actually change according to the request the user is making. So to begin with, any Node.js application will have a package.json file. So this is the file that will define what the name of your application is, what your version for the application is, what is the entry point or the first file that the application should run, and these are some scripts that you might want to run. And then there's another important part is this dependency. So in the environment with the Node.js and Node.js, we have a set of libraries that is available to all in an open source environment. There are a lot of people exposing different kind of libraries, and you can easily import those libraries and use them to write your application and make your whole application writing experience very short and pleasant. So for this example, we are using Express, which is a library that enables us to send and receive data from the outside world. We are using a body parser. Body parser is again is a library that will help us to understand what user is sending into a machine understandable manner, and it works together with Express.js or the Express package. Handlebars is one of the libraries that will allow us to modify the data in a dynamic manner. So when we write our HTML, we can use handlebars to insert some dynamic data into that HTML. Excuse me. So coming to our code, so we'll write this code in our index.js. So I'll come to the dependencies one by one as they come and go, as they're required. So Express will be our basic dependency, or this is what will be our web server actually. This will allow us to receive the request and send the requests. Body parser will help us to understand what these requests contain, as in what data or the URL information they might contain. We'll come to handle
I
parser.
want to explain what exactly is Express. And it's one of the important libraries which needs to be included in JS Code, Node.js Code.
Okay. So guys, Express is basically a web server or the library that will allow you to receive the request from the user and send back any data to them. So Node.js or any backend environment will be just another set of code that is executing on your system or on the server. Now to enable the HTTP request or the hypertext transfer protocol, as we call it, you would need a web server running. So Express will facilitate as a web server for us in this example. So Express again is the most popular web server that is used in the Node.js environment. Most of the applications that you'll see on the web that are running on Node.js will be utilizing Express.
Thanks,
So,
Ashish.
yeah. So then first of all, we initiate or create a variable that will initialize our application. So this line here itself is a simple JavaScript code, and it gives us a variable with the Express application initiated into it. Now, after that, we tell our application to use these body parser, and that body parser will be configured to understand JSON, and it will be used to configure the URL encoded data. So, for example, if you check into my URL right now, there is a intro, there is hash, there is index.js. So essentially, all the characters cannot be entered into the browser URL. So if I have to give an example, if you can see on my screen right now, I see a part of the URL which is here after this question mark. So this is one of the parameters that I'm passing on to my application from this URL. So if it again has a format that it needs to contain identifier and it needs to contain a value. A simple name equals to value format. So since equals to is used over here, I cannot use this equal to into the value part of things. For example, if I had to write the value as 5 equals to something, ts equals to 5 equals to something, I will not be able to do that as it will break the format. For that purposes, we encode our URL to something like %20. %20 essentially represents space. So this will tell my application that the value that I have passed is 5%20. As you would see, this automatically transformed the URL as I ran the application. It automatically changed the URL into an encoded or acceptable value. What our body parser here is telling our application is that it can accept the URL encoded values here. Then we set up our application to serve some of the public files or some of the files that do not need any processing. They will be served as it is and as the user asks for them. So for example, our style sheets, which do not require any processing at the backend, they can be served publicly. So anyone requesting for a style sheet should not have to go through the whole process of getting the data processed. Okay, so this is this part of the code gets our application all set up for us to write our routes or write our URLs and send the data back to the user. This tells the server what to do, what to use, and how to process the data that is incoming. So for any path, the basic path for us is the index route or the base route. So we write a first route in which we simply are pushing a static file called index.html, which contains our HTML code. And we will be defining our another route, which will be a dynamic route, which depending on what user is sending, we will send another template or another data or dynamic data to the user. Okay.
So guys, just to understand, the first is you need to import the libraries which you will use. Then you need to initialize it. And then he's talking about the request which you got to parse that request and then execute and then return it back.
Right. Okay. So let me just run this application. So this starts my server. So in my browser, whenever I request the root or the index route, the base route, this is my domain. So if I request a route onto this, it will serve a file for me, which is in the public folder, and it's called index.html, which is right here. So what it does is it simply sends this data onto my browser, and my browser further passes the data and shows it to me accordingly. So I'll show you what my browser actually received from the server. This is what my browser received from the server, and this is the actual content I had in my static file. So if I go back to my code and I check what I was doing at our index route was, I was just sending back a file that was in public index.html. So this is a very simple use case and use case that will be useful in 60% of the situations where it will be serving just the informational or the static data. And the second part of this comes is when we have the dynamic routes or the information needs to change on what we are requesting. We'll be talking about our dynamic route. So where the information that we see on the screen or what we send to the browser will actually be changing based on the URL or the information we are asking it for. So let's first see what we have actually done in our code. So you'll see that we have defined a route called slug. If you notice, sorry, I forgot to tell you this, but if you notice, we have defined our verbs like this, app.get. So it is telling that this has to be a get request, and it will be made at this specific path. And then we send the server file, then we send the file back to the server, the browser. Similarly, here we have told the application that when they get the verb as get and they get a dynamic URL with a single variable, which for our reference we'll call slug, then it needs to execute this specific function. In this function, what we are doing is we are feeding a file, or we are importing our template, which is this specific file in public directory using the handlebars. So handlebars is one of our libraries that help us to write templates. So let me show you what the code will look like. It will be a normal HTML code. And let me compare it with so this is what my index.html looks like. This was completely static, nothing dynamic. Whenever I call this file, I'll always be seeing this specific data. But when we moved on to our dynamic part, What changed here was essentially it is again the markup, but using handlebars or using the template tags for the handlebars, we are defining a dynamic value here called slug. And this could be any value or anything that we want to pass into this template. But for our example, we are using just the slug. So this is again the same HTML, but with the with this variable, which will be rendered dynamically on each request. So handlebars is basically a library that allows us to write these specific tags and manipulate some of the data dynamically according to the data that we'll provide into it. For example, this is the data that the content that for the template that we wanted. We compiled that template. We compiled the content into a template. We prepared our data. So in the context variable, we have our data where we said, okay, slug should be something we get from the request as a parameter. So this is the parameter that we use here, slug. If I change the name here to say title, I would also need to change it here to the title. But this needs to correspond to what we used in our template. So this prepares a context. Then we tell our template to process that context and give us the generated output. For our case, it is in HTML, but if we had changed this to say any other format, it might have been a simple string, it might have been a JavaScript part or anything. It would have returned back the same format with the dynamic content replaced. It will simply go in, replace the slug part with whatever we have provided. And when we have this HTML with us ready, so since we know that the browser can only understand HTML as the basic markup language, we send back the HTML back to the browser. So let me just show you how this actually looks like or how it actually is working. So as you would notice, it will work on slash and then a dynamic parameter. And into my code or onto the front end, it should show me this text. You just made a dynamic request for, and whatever I had passed into the URL. So let's say I make a simple request here. Hello. So you will see that I received the dynamic content, or I can see something that changed according to the URL. But although my code was same, but the data that I'm seeing changed here. And then let's just see what our server actually sent back to us. If you'll notice, the server actually sent back to us the HTML that was already replaced with the word hello. This is not something that the browser did, but something that the server did on its own. So for example, if I change it to something else here, let's say, maybe put a smiley here. So it will just give me back the smiley or whatever the content that I had put in here. And if I go again and check the source code that my server had sent me back, I'll say that this part is now replaced with the smiley. So there might occur a question like, where does this all come in handy? Like, where does this part with the dynamic part comes in handy? So if I have to take an example, the most popular example would be Amazon. So when you see the product on the Amazon, you'll notice that most of the product pages, the initial informational pages, they look the same. But depending on what product you're trying to view, the data on them changes. And the another part to notice would be, since the product is changing, the URL or the URL part of the request also changes. So this is where the dynamic URLs come into play, that we use the same template, same structure to send back to the browser, but we modify it slightly in terms of data. we modify it depending on the request or the resource that is being requested for. Okay.
I
So
think
this
I
was our,
strongly encourage people to actually try for both the examples of a static file. This will actually give you confidence of building a complete Node.js app, and this is fairly straightforward and easy. Once you have
yeah,
done, maybe the next approach would be to actually do some sort of basic app, maybe an attendance app or any application which you think is sending some dynamic data back.
yeah. And just to give you the brief of the last part of the code, this actually tells our application that it needs to listen on the port 3000. So one part of the address for the web application is the IP address. The another part for the address of that address is the port, or you can say it corresponds to a door, to which gate number should the request be sent to. So most common or any request that you make here is actually sent to port 80. The web browsers, any URL that you make a request here, it's sent to the port 80, which because of the environment that we are using, the development environment that we are using, it is automatically mapped to the port 3000. So if I was to run on this machine, if I was to run this code on my system, I would actually need to specify the port as 3000. But just because of the ID, I can access it directly with the URL that they have provided me. And if I was to request any, so we saw here that how we mounted our public folder, or we told our web application that anything in public directory is accessible by the users. So if I was to access here the style sheet, so it will actually give me the content of our style sheet, which right now is blank, but let's see. Okay. So you will see that that I requested for my style sheet, it came here without for me to writing any specific code for that style sheet or telling my server how to handle it, because I have exposed my public route already. So guys, this was one of our applications or our basic example that we could use to understand how the web application would work or what the web application might look like.
So just to summarize what we kind of focused on today's training program. We talked about the fundamentals of web technologies, which included HTML and other web services, different type of web services, including SOAP, REST APIs on the server side and client side. Then we also spoke about some of the prominent languages in both the front end and back end. We talked about the frameworks available, the most popular ones on the server side or the back end would be Node. We talked about React has been one of the more commonly used frameworks and very effectively used. Most of the frameworks today are kind of written in JS, JavaScript. So essentially, we discovered that JavaScript is one language area which everybody on the call should develop. It's fairly easy. Since it's a scripting language. And then we actually developed a complete, very simple app which it displayed both static web page as well as a dynamic web page using REPL, which is an IDE environment. It's fairly straightforward. Um, and typically you instantiate or you set up an Express server, you do a body parser which takes the request, parses the request, and then you have a mechanism to send the response back to the browser, which can be. So this is what we kind of learned. I strongly encourage everybody of you on the call should actually go through this and try this once we are done with the session.
And thank you everyone for joining us today. And if you have any queries, everyone, I'm mentioning our email ID here. You can reach us directly by writing on that email ID all the queries you have. Also, we have uploaded lots of inspiring content on our social media platforms. So you may also follow us at Youthopedia page, official page on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Thank you. Thank you, Ashish.
Yeah, so gentlemen, I'm actually putting the details for turning ideas also. If you want any more detailed around knowledge around any specific area, feel free to reach out us by following us on Insta, LinkedIn, and YouTube channels.
If you guys have any queries, you want to know about anything more, you can just drop an email or just ping me on Twitter.
Thank you everybody for attending today's session. Thank you Ashish for joining in. Really appreciate your time. I hope this was very
Thank
useful
you.
for people on the call today, and look forward for many more sessions going forward. Once again, before we close, thanks everybody. Thanks Youthopedia team for organizing this, and thanks Ashish for giving a lot of insights.
Thank you, Ashish.